There is a spiritual path that few speak of, not because it is forbidden, but because it is too painful to be romanticized. It is the path of spiritual desolation, that place where God seems to have disappeared, where prayer no longer brings solace, where the soul wanders blindly in profound darkness. Most flee from this path. But Saint Teresa of Avila reveals a shocking truth. It is precisely there, in the dark night of the soul, that the most profound transformation takes place. Desolation is not divine abandonment. It is the pedagogy of love. Have you ever felt that God is silent? That your prayers hit the ceiling and return empty? That anxiety, fear, and worry have taken over your heart, and even faith doesn't seem enough? Then you are closer to God than you imagine. Teresa lived this intensely and survived, to teach us that desolation is the gateway to the deepest mansions of the inner castle. But be warned, this path requires courage. It requires you to descend into the abyss of yourself, and trust that God is there, waiting. In this journey, you will discover the secrets Teresa kept in her works, The Interior Castle, the Book of Life, The Way of Perfection. You will learn to navigate the dark abodes, to transform pain into prayer, to find inner peace even when everything around you crumbles. But this only works if you take the first step, recognizing that you need God more than answers. Spiritual desolation is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of true union with the divine. Are you ready to enter? Now it's your turn. Comment below, which of these struggles you face most often, the feeling of being abandoned by God, persistent anxiety, or the fear of not being worthy of divine love. Your faith can inspire someone today. Navigating the Dark Mansions, Teresa's Guide to Spiritual Desolation and Inner Healing. There are dwellings in the inner castle where the light seems to fade, where the soul walks blindly, stumbling over its own wounds. Saint Teresa knew these dark chambers well, not as places of abandonment, but as furnaces where God purifies what is deepest within us. Spiritual desolation is not a sign of failure. It is the divine invitation to descend even deeper, where true healing happens far from the eyes of the world. In the 6th and 7th mansions, Teresa describes a paradoxical pain. The closer one gets to God, the more acute the feeling of emptiness. It is as if the soul, upon touching the divine light, sees its own shadows for the first time. This inner suffering should not be feared, but embraced with humility. It is there, in the silence of the dark night, that God works without haste, removing layer by layer everything that prevents us from being fully His. When you feel that prayer no longer brings comfort, when your heart seems like stone and your mind a desert, remember, you are in the deepest dwellings. Do not run away. Remain. Breathe slowly. Whisper Psalm 46. Be still, and know that I am God. Emotional and spiritual healing does not come from quick answers, but from the silent trust of those who allow themselves to be molded by the potter's hands. When God feels absent, Teresa's mystical insights on the silence of the soul. Saint Teresa lived through long periods in which God seemed to have completely withdrawn from her inner life. She prayed, wept, sought but found only silence. It was not abandonment. It was divine pedagogy. God hides Himself so that the soul may learn to love Him not for the comfort He brings, but for who He is. This felt absence is, in truth, a deeper presence, operating where the senses cannot reach. In the Book of Life, Teresa confesses that there were days when prayer seemed useless, when anxiety took over and racing thoughts wouldn't let her rest. But it was precisely in those moments of aridity that she discovered true contemplative prayer, the kind that doesn't depend on emotions, but on pure surrender. The soul that perseveres in the silence of God is being prepared for mystical union, where there is no longer any separation between the beloved and the lover. When you feel that God is distant, don't abandon prayer. Sit in silence, breathe deeply. Simply say, I am here, Lord, even without feeling your presence. This faithfulness in the darkness is what transforms the soul. Psalm 23 reminds us, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The felt absence is the path to the experienced presence, the neuroscience of spiritual dryness. What Teresa teaches about the brain in prayer, Saint Teresa described with impressive precision what happens in the mind during prayer. Thoughts that leap like wild horses, anxiety that tightens the chest, the inability to concentrate on God. She didn't know neuroscience, But she knew the human soul profoundly. What she called inner restlessness is the same mental turmoil that today robs us of sleep and peace. The contemplative prayer that Teresa teaches is the divine antidote to this agitation. In the path to perfection, she guides her sisters to practice inner recollection, closing the doors of the senses, quieting the mind, descending to the center of the soul where God dwells. This process is not magic, it is transformative. When the soul repeatedly quiets itself before God, something changes within. Racing thoughts slow down, worry loses its power, and an inexplicable peace begins to sprout. It is as if the brain learns a new rhythm, the rhythm of divine presence. Start today. Set aside 5 minutes each morning. Sit in silence. Don't try to control your thoughts. Just watch them pass like clouds. Breathe slowly and repeat inwardly, God is here. Over time, this simple practice will reshape not only your mind, but your entire emotional life. Psalm 91 promises, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Inner peace is the fruit of faithful practice, emotional wounds, and the path to perfection. Teresa's therapeutic approach to suffering. Saint Teresa did not deny pain. She transformed it. She knew that emotional wounds, rejection, hurt, fear, loneliness, do not disappear with hurried prayers. They need to be taken to the inner garden, watered with sincere tears, and exposed to the light of God. In the interior castle, she teaches that perfection is not the absence of suffering, but the capacity to suffer with humility, surrendering each wound into the hands of the divine physician, who heals without haste. Teresa distinguished between the pain that paralyzes and the pain that purifies. The first is born from attachment to one's own ego, from resistance to accepting God's will. The second is the fruit of detachment, when the soul recognizes its smallness and abandons itself completely to divine love. This surrender is not passivity, it is courage. It is saying to God, "Take my wounds, my anxiety, my fear. I trust in you, and in this trust, something profound is healed." Today, bring to mind an emotional wound that still hurts. Don't hide it. Place it before God in silent prayer. Take a deep breath and say, "Lord, I surrender this pain to you." Repeat this as many times as necessary. Spiritual healing happens in layers, like the mansions of a castle. Psalm 147 comforts us. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He is not in a hurry. He has a purpose. The castle under siege, battling inner demons and psychological collapse in Teresa's life. The inner castle of Saint Teresa was not a place of constant peace. It was a besieged fortress. She faced violent temptations, profound despair, sleepless nights tormented by dark thoughts. There were times when she felt the walls of her soul were about to crumble. But Teresa learned that these inner battles were not a sign of spiritual weakness. They were the field where God forges saints. Every attack on the soul is an opportunity to strengthen trust in God. In the Book of Life, she recounts periods of spiritual oppression so intense that she could barely pray. The anguish was physical, emotional, and spiritual. But it was precisely there, at the bottom of the abyss, that she discovered the power of simple prayer. I trust in you. These were not eloquent words. They were the cry of a soul that refused to let go of the divine hand. And God always answered not by removing the battle, but by giving her the strength to face it with dignity and renewed faith. When you feel under inner attack, paralyzing fear, destructive thoughts, a feeling of collapse, don't fight alone. Seek refuge in God. Pray Psalm 91. Under his wings you will find refuge. Breathe slowly. Light a candle. Make the sign of the cross. These simple gestures are powerful spiritual weapons. Victory does not come from self-strength, but from confident surrender. The castle endures because God is its foundation. From restlessness to recollection. Teresa's method for calming the troubled soul. Saint Teresa was well aware of the restlessness of the modern soul, that inner agitation that prevents the mind from resting, that transforms prayer into struggle and silence into torment. In the way of perfection, she offers a precise spiritual remedy, inner recollection. It is not a complicated technique. It is a simple movement of turning inward, of closing the doors to the outside world and finding God in the center of the soul, where he has always been waiting. The process of reflection begins with the body. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, breathe slowly. Then gather your senses, Stop seeking solace in external distractions. Finally, descend into your heart and imagine yourself entering your inner castle, room by room, until you reach the center where God dwells. Teresa promises that those who practice this reflection daily find profound peace, even amidst chaos. Anxiety loses its power when the soul learns to inhabit its own center. Begin today, before bed, 5 minutes of quiet reflection. Turn off your cell phone. Sit in silence. Take 3 deep breaths. Say inwardly, God, I return home to within myself, where you dwell. Don't force anything, just remain. Over time, this practice transforms sleepless nights into nights of peace. Psalm 46 teaches us, be still, and know that I am God. Inner peace is not an achievement. It is surrender. The purifying fire, how God transforms pain into joy. In Teresa's mystical experience, Saint Teresa lived a paradoxical experience that few understand. Pain that transforms into joy. Suffering that becomes sweetness. She called this delightful inflammation, an inner fire that burns away everything that is not of God, but at the same time fills the soul with indescribable love. It is not spiritual masochism. It is divine alchemy. God purifies through the fire of His love, and what seemed unbearable reveals itself as transforming grace. In the deepest recesses of the interior castle, Teresa describes how the soul is wounded by the love of Geodia, wound that hurts and heals at the same time. It is as if the heart were pierced by a divine arrow that removes all resistance, all attachment, all fear. What remains is pure surrender. And in this surrender, even amidst suffering, springs forth a joy that the world cannot give or take away. It is the joy of one who has finally found their true home in God. When pain comes in, don't reject it immediately. Ask God, what do you want to teach me through this? Take a deep breath. Offer your suffering as a prayer. Say, Lord, transform this pain into love. Teresa shows us that the cross is not the end. It is the path to resurrection. Psalm 30 proclaims, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. God transforms everything, even the deepest pain, to an instrument of sanctification, spiritual desolation, and the journey inward. Teresa's map for the lost soul. There are moments in the spiritual life when the soul feels completely lost, without direction, without consolation, without certainty that God still hears it. Saint Teresa lived through these seasons of desolation and mapped them precisely in the interior castle. Each mansion represents a stage of the journey, from initial fear to profound trust, from distraction to contemplation, from emptiness to union. Desolation is not a deviation from the path. It is an essential part of it. It is in the darkness that the soul learns to walk by faith, not by sight. Teresa teaches that spiritual desolation has a purpose. It reveals what is still attached to the ego, what still seeks self-consolation instead of God. It is painful, but necessary. The soul that traverses the dark night, without giving up, emerges stronger, more humble, more free. Each doubt faced, each fear overcome, each moment of perseverance in dry prayer is a step that climbs towards the center of the castle, where God awaits with open arms. If you are lost now, know this, you are not alone. God is closer than ever, working in silence. Open Teresa's interior castle, let her be your guide. Pray Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Breathe. Take one step at a time. The inner journey has no shortcuts, but it has a certain destination, the heart of God, and each dwelling place traversed is a victory of love over fear. Humility in the abyss. Teresa's struggle with self-worth and divine love. Saint Teresa struggled for years with a devastating feeling, the sensation of not being worthy of God's love. She saw herself as small, imperfect, full of flaws. There were times when the shame was so great that she could barely lift her eyes in prayer. But it was precisely in this abyss of humility that she found the liberating truth. God does not love us because we are worthy. He makes us worthy because He loves us. True humility is not self-deprecation. It is recognizing our smallness and, at the same time, the immensity of divine love. In the Book of Life, Teresa confesses her doubts about the authenticity of her own humility. Was it genuine, or merely disguised pride? This inner struggle tormented her. But God, in His loving pedagogy, taught her that humility is not measured by feelings of inferiority, but by the capacity to receive love without deserving it. Surrendering to God's love even, feeling unworthy is the most courageous act of the soul. It is saying, Lord, I do not deserve it, but I accept your love, because you offer it freely. Today, look at your wounds to self-esteem, your doubts about your worth. Don't hide them from God. Take them to prayer. Say, Lord, I feel unworthy, but I trust that you love me anyway. Take a deep breath. Let that love in. Psalm 139 declares, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. You are loved, not for what you do, but for who God is. And that love heals every wound of rejection. The interior castle and the science of inner silence. Teresa's legacy for modern seekers. Saint Teresa left a legacy that spanned centuries. The interior castle is not only a spiritual map, but a therapeutic method for the modern soul. In times of epidemic anxiety, racing thoughts, and sleepless nights, Teresa offers what science now confirms. Inner silence heals. The contemplative practice she taught recollection, mental prayer. Descent into the center of the soul transforms not only spiritual life, but also the emotional and mental health of those who practice it faithfully. What Teresa called union with God is an experience of profound peace, of a loving presence that calms all fear. She did not promise the absence of suffering, but divine presence in the midst of it. Her dwellings teach that the inner journey is progressive. It begins with small steps of silence, grows in trust, and matures in total surrender. Each moment of contemplative prayer reconnects the soul with its source, with the hiding place of the Almighty, where there is divine protection and true consolation. Begin your journey through the inner mansions today. Don't expect perfection. Start where you are. 5 minutes of silence in the morning. A prayer before bed. A sigh of trust in God during the day. Teresa shows us that the path of the soul is not for distant mystics, but for weary hearts seeking peace. Psalm 62 reminds us, My soul waits silently for God alone. Inner silence is the gateway to divine presence, and that presence transforms everything. The journey through the dark chambers of the inner castle does not end here, it only begins. Saint Teresa showed us that spiritual desolation is not a curse, but an invitation. God does not abandon us in the darkness. He meets us there, in the deepest place of the soul, where no distraction can reach us. Now, it is up to you to decide. Will you flee from the divine silence, or will you embrace it? Will you resist purification, or will you surrender to the fire of love that transforms everything? Start today. Don't wait until you feel ready. Set aside 5 minutes each morning for inner reflection. Pray Psalm 91 before bed. When anxiety comes, take a deep breath and say, God, I trust in you. When fear knocks at the door, seek refuge under his wings. When emotional pain tightens its grip, surrender it into the hands of the divine physician. Inner peace is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of God in the midst of the storm. And you already have this presence. Just stop, be silent, and acknowledge it. Ask yourself now, what do I need to surrender to God today? What emotional wound do I still carry alone? What fear prevents me from descending into the deepest mansions? What anxiety steals my peace? Write this down in prayer. Speak to God as Teresa spoke, with brutal sincerity, with tears, with the trust of a beloved daughter. Faith in God overcomes all anxiety, all fear, all desolation. But it is necessary to take the first step, surrender. If this script touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to receive more content about Teresian spirituality and the path of the soul. Share it with someone who needs to hear that God never abandons. He only works in silence. And comment below, which teaching of Saint Teresa has most transformed you today? Your faith strengthens our community.